I'm Alex and I'm 46 years old. I am Rear Admiral Vance to the U.S. Navy, a guardian of secrets that have the power to destroy entire nations. However, my family still views me as merely the annoying daughter. They were unaware that the cornerstone of their flawless, well-maintained life is a falsehood that I can dispel with a single word at my sister's wedding in Newport today. Nevertheless, a naive hope came to the surface as I drove along the coast, seeing the sunshine glitter on the waves. Perhaps things would be different this time. Perhaps years of being made to feel invisible could be erased by the sea breeze and champagne. I was just a lady attempting to believe in the concept of family for a brief period of time. The chime of a single text message dashed that dream. It was a dagger disguised as a notification, and it came from my mother. "For heaven's sake, Elena, I heard you were considering donning that uniform. It's not appropriate for the occasion. Or please consider wearing something else." White knuckles gripped the wheel as my hands tensed. The 2 silver stars I received in a sea of steel and fire were down to an insult and a disgrace. A deep, profound, and terrifying cold took the place of the air that had left my lungs in a hushed gasp. They wished for me to feel insignificant. Has the very thing that made you great ever caused you to feel inferior? They were anticipating a ghost in a beige outfit, so please let me know in the comments. A Rear Admiral in her complete, unrepentant uniform is coming to confront them. That one text message wasn't the only reason I decided to wear my uniform. It had been forged over years of silent rejections, each one causing a tiny wound, but taken as a whole, they had drained me of any hope that I would be accepted. A few weeks earlier, shortly after I had returned to my Norfolk apartment following a strenuous joint forces exercise in the Atlantic, the last wound had appeared. After the incessant hum of a battleship, the cool, still air in my flat was a nice change of pace. All I wanted was the privacy of my own place and a hot shower. I sat down with my iPad and poured myself a glass of water, the ice crystals clinking in the unexpected silence. I hardly ever looked at my social media feed because I couldn't quite identify to its well-manicured bliss. But I was drawn in by something that day. And there it was, a professionally taken picture of my sister Claire, dancing in the arms of an unfamiliar man, her face beaming with happiness. The location was clearly the waterfront deck of Newport's Ida Lewis Yacht Club, which is closely associated with my family's social circle. "Yes, the future Mr. and Ryan Blake," she said in the caption. I didn't feel sad. Hundreds of comments flooded the page. Then everything just halted for a moment, leaving me with a hollow thump in my chest. An exuberant heart emoji was left by my mother, Margaret. Richard, my father, had reposted the picture with a new caption. "I'm so proud of our lovely family and the legacy we're creating." I looked at each picture in the album. Claire with our parents, Claire with her friends, and Claire with her new fiancé. I looked for my name everywhere, in the comments, in the tags, etc. Nothing was present. It was erased digitally. It wasn't an error. There was a message. I didn't belong to that lovely family or that tradition. I was simply somewhere else. It was not a melancholy sensation. The emptiness was stark and chilling. The sensation of locating your homeland on a map of your own life has been erased. The tangible evidence of my status showed up a few days later. In my mailbox was a thick, cream-colored envelope made of the high-end cardstock my mother preferred. It has a subtle hint of her trademark Lily of the Valley scent. But I felt like I was slapped by the address label. Not Alex, the Rear Admiral, not even Elena. As though I were a satellite office of the main brand, it was addressed to the Vance family in Norfolk, Virginia. The invitation, which announced the wedding at the Chandler at Cliff Walk, was tastefully embossed inside. There was only a QR code to scan for the RSVP. There was no handwritten note or personal touch. It was a summons, a formal notification sent to a distant relative, not an invitation. It served as a reminder from my mother that I was invited, not invited. I made the decision to give Jack Morgan a call that night. Not to whine, but to firmly establish myself in a society that valued my presence. Despite the shaking in my soul, I dialed his phone with a calm hand. The second ring caught his attention. "Admiral." His voice was a well-known source of reverence. I didn't waste time making small talk. "Ben," I murmured, my voice sounding aloof and frightfully composed. "They are getting married." On the other end, there was a beat of silence. He was fully aware of their identities. "I see," he remarked in a deliberately bland tone. However, I could hear the underlying wrath directed at me. With words that tasted like ash, I said, "They don't want an admiral in the family photos, Ben. They want someone invisible in the photos." One more pause, longer this time. I could see him in his office, his mouth clenched as he gazed out over the naval installation. His voice was low and solid, tinged with the passionate loyalty earned in shared danger, and he spoke at last. With a single word that carried the weight of years of service combined, he said, "Ma'am, ghosts don't exist. Shadows are created by light, and your light is so intense that it can completely obscure their sky." His remarks cauterized the wound but did not heal it. The bleeding was halted. With the steely resolve ingrained in my bones, I hung up the phone. I went to my closet and pushed the doors open. My service dress white uniform, with its rows of ribbons communicating stories they would never comprehend, was hanging in its protective garment bag. And the 2 silver stars I got on the shoulders, they didn't know its true name, so they called it an embarrassment. It was the only item I would be wearing to that wedding, and it was also my truth and my armor. My mother's text message felt more substantial than any equipment I had ever used. It was the reverberation of a lifetime of rejections, not only in order. The recollection of my immaculate white uniform hanging in my closet vanished as I held onto the steering wheel, to be replaced with a harsh white remembrance. It was a remembrance of the day I gained the privilege of wearing my first uniform. My family decided they had other things to do that day. As the miles of I-95 faded into the expansive green of Annapolis, my thoughts turned to the past. A sea of families humming with pride so dense you could taste it filled the Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium, which was electrifying. Cheers and the soaring chords of anchors away filled the air. Then the time arrived. 1,000 white hats let sail into the dazzling blue sky after the order was given. A group of white birds flying up in a flawless coordinated jubilation. As a recently commissioned ensign in the U.S. Navy, I stood there with a stiff, unnatural smile. I looked around the stands trying to find the exact seats I had marked on a map, the section and the row. However, among a crowd of thousands they were empty, just 2 stark blue empty plastic seats. I had been cleaning the buttons on my uniform that morning when the phone call had arrived. Richard, my father, was there, his voice fast and clipped. "Elena, a significant investment opportunity in Shanghai has emerged. I realize that the timing is awful, but it's revolutionary. We must not overlook it." Next on the line was my mother, Margaret, whose voice was silky smooth and brimming with phony pity. "First things first, sweetheart, you know your father. Needless to say, we're really proud. What about Claire?" My sister, who is 17, participated in a club tennis competition. A competition for the club? Both the nationals and the regionals were absent. It seems that her only sister's graduation from one of the world's most prominent military academies was less significant than a small neighborhood club competition. I had never felt more utterly alone as I stood amid my applauding, hugging classmates and posed for photos with their happy parents. I have a picture from that day of me and 3 of my housemates smiling boldly with our arms around each other. However, a thorough examination of my eyes reveals the empty space where my family should have been. My new minimalist lodgings received a hefty mail from their bank a week later. There was only a check for $5,000 and a modest, tasteful card with my mother's flawless impersonal script on it. No message, no proud note. "Congratulations, my love. Get yourself a lovely celebration item. A pearl necklace, maybe. A necklace made of pearls." As if a piece of jewelry could be used to measure and discard 4 years of demanding marine engineering studies, hard evenings spent studying naval strategy, and a sacred commitment to defend my nation. It was a serious insult rather than merely careless. Their method of converting my world into the only language they knew was this: the language of status symbols and price tags. My accomplishment was worthless in their world of extravagant parties and high-end labels. I recall feeling the icy weight of their miscommunication as I stood there with that check. I then carefully and slowly tore the check into little accurate pieces, letting them drop like confetti at a one-person procession into the garbage pail. I never again hoped that they would comprehend. Every time I visited the Newport family home, the sting of that memory was exacerbated. The home served as a museum showcasing Clara's achievements. Pictures of her winning ribbons at horse shows studded the walls, her prom photos and her elaborately silver-framed acceptance letter to Boston College. Her 17th birthday was celebrated with a whole glossy album, a few months after my graduation from Annapolis. Dozens of images captured in Boston's renowned Les Beliers restaurant. Claire in a BMW. On either side of her, my mother and father stood, their faces glowing with an almost blinding pride. And me in this shrine to the family? It was a single tiny 4-year-old snapshot that was nearly concealed by a leather-bound collection of Dickens novels on a packed library shelf. It was the picture of me and my housemates taken on graduation day. It would appear to be a photo of their daughter's friend to any visitor. It was obvious that the Vance family had a single lovely daughter. I occasionally stayed in the guest room, but otherwise I was simply a stranger. I should have anticipated this outcome. I should have recalled the evening I informed them that I would be going to Annapolis. The smell of wood polish and old money filled the air as we sat in the living room with its mahogany paneling. With a gentle clinking sound, my father put down his scotch glass on the marble coaster. He gazed at me with a profound, tired disappointment that was even worse than rage. His voice was flat as he said, "Elena, a Vance lady has no place in the Navy. Our moniker wasn't created on ship decks, but rather in boardrooms. You are squandering your intelligence and the contacts I could give you on something that will not actually help this family." A younger, more impressionable me at the time believed he just didn't get my enthusiasm or my drive to help something greater than myself. But now that I'm driving to my sister's wedding, I can truly understand. A code was a tangible benefit to the family. It never meant sacrifice, honor, or responsibility. It meant strategic alliances and stock values. My entire career and my entire life were just a mistake on their ledger. He was obviously mistaken. It wasn't a waste of my choosing. I became the woman I am now because of it. He was correct about one thing, though. There was a price for it. The cost was a quiet, persistent solitude. Only in the middle of a huge, empty ocean or in a room full of your own family can you find such solitude. My dad was mistaken. It wasn't a waste of my choosing. I was forged by it. However, the price of that forging was a loneliness that shaped everything around me, a loneliness that was measured in the wide, lonely expanses of the ocean rather than in kilometers from home. My family viewed me as a collection of pins on a map, an abstraction. For me, it was a life spent in steel hallways beneath merciless sky. Missed holidays filled the first several years. I spent my first Christmas as an officer on a destroyer in the Persian Gulf, where the atmosphere was heavy with anxiety and sand. I recall using a crackling satellite phone to call home. The line delay makes the distance seem even longer. I could hear the noises of a Newport Christmas party on the other end. The sound of glasses clinking, music booming and laughter erupting. The tone of my mother's speech was distant and bright. "It isn't a good moment, Elena, my dear. We're just having supper together." I could hear Claire talking excitedly about a new diamond bracelet over the static. Less than a minute passed throughout the call. No one asked if you were safe or if we missed you. I sat in the steel windowless wardroom of the ship, eating a lukewarm, ready-to-eat package of beef stew while they passed around a tray of gleaming roast goose and poured pricey Bordeaux. And that's when I really got it. Not only was I not present, but I was also overlooked, an afterthought in their festive celebration. Neither a well-timed phone call nor a familial link led to my promotions. Fueled by stale black coffee and the unwavering determination to succeed, they were earned in 36-hour shifts on the bridge. I earned them by having to make snap decisions that may mean the difference between life and death for 200 sailors. One deployment in the North Sea comes to mind. Suddenly, a weather bomb, a rogue storm appeared, transforming the water into a churning gray monster. With a roar akin to cannons firing, the office building-sized waves crashed over the bow. I was on the command deck for 2 days in a row. With my eyes burning from staring at the radar, I survived on dry crackers and adrenaline rushing through my veins, coordinating every action to prevent the ship from being ripped apart. Exhausted, injured, but whole, we returned to port in Scotland. I was quietly deeply proud of my crew and myself. I came across a photo that Claire had shared from the Palm Beach breakers the same week. She had a cucumber slice over one eye, a fluffy white robe wrapped around her, and a statement lamenting her weariness after a demanding week of shopping. I was chastened by the contrast rather than enraged or envious. It was as though we were in different worlds with distinct rules of physics, where her tiredness was a luxury and mine was a necessity for survival. My whole life was invisible in her universe. However, it was on the swaying decks of those dark ships that I found the comfort I never experienced in my family's gilded cage. It was in my crew's little silent motions. After a hard watch in the frigid Arctic, I recall a young Jack Morgan, later just an ensign himself, gently setting a steaming mug of chicken soup in my shaky, icy hands. He simply assumed you could use this, ma'am, without saying anything further. A lopsided baked cake would inexplicably materialize in the galley, and my chiefs, the non-commissioned officers, would somehow know it was my birthday. They were my relatives. They recognized the dark circles beneath my eyes and knew where they came from. They were aware of the expense involved in placing the rank on my collar. Neither my father's stock holdings nor my last name mattered to them. The officer standing next to them, the one who would sacrifice all for them, was someone they cared about. Money could never purchase that strong, unadulterated loyalty, and my family would never comprehend it. Never was that truth more evident than following the Orion incident. The mission where I had to disobey a clear command in order to save my crew was the one that almost put an end to my career. I returned home to Newport after receiving a few days of shore leave. The house was thick with silence. I tried to explain it to my father over a perfectly cooked filet mignon at the dinner table. I talked about the decision I had to make, the crushing pressure, and the sonar failure. He gave a hazy nod while keeping his gaze on the financial news ticker on the den's big screen TV. "It sounds intense," he observed in a disinterested tone. "In addition, Lockheed Martin's stock has increased once more." Claire wrinkled her nose and spoke before I could reply. "Can't you refrain from discussing such frightening topics? My appetite is being ruined by it." I ceased speaking. Under the gentle glow of the dining room chandelier, I examined their faces and saw that they were not only uninterested, but also unable to comprehend. War, danger, life and death were merely cinematic concepts in their secure, predictable existence. My reality was not them. With all its grimness and dignity, my reality was merely an awkward tale that interrupted their expertly prepared dinner. I was a ghost in the chilly, uncaring world my family lived in. But I was spotted among the very people I had vowed to lead and protect on the steel decks of the United States Navy. The modest, unwavering deeds of my chosen family gave me the warmth I never found in Newport's mahogany-paneled chambers. Jack Morgan was the focal point of that family. Ben became the silent defender of my sanity and went beyond simply becoming my executive officer. Especially after my parents' occasional cold phone conversations, he became attuned to my emotional rhythms. He was aware that my family constituted a weakness in my defenses. He would not ask questions nor make cliched remarks after an especially scathing exchange with my mother. Rather, after a little while, a mug of hot black sugar-free Earl Grey tea would show up on my desk. He would suggest, "You look tired, Admiral, maybe you should take a moment." Without even asking what was said, he created an imperceptible barrier around me, a peaceful haven where I didn't have to justify my suffering. Ben erected a fortress to keep me safe, while my own family built walls to keep me out. 1,000 meaningless apologies were worthless compared to that silent, perceptive care. In addition, he became my personal historian and the guardian of a past that my family decided to overlook. He recalled the significant events that I frequently overlooked due to the hectic nature of my work. I was buried in operations reports and totally unaware on the 10th anniversary of the day I took command of my first ship, the USS Gonzales. However, there was a little, incredibly realistic model of the destroyer on my desk when I arrived at my workplace that morning. A handmade card on plain, government-issue material sat next to it. "Happy anniversary, Admiral. She was fortunate to have you on board." He recalled that, out of a profound and enduring regard, rather than out of idle curiosity, he had taken the time to learn about the various chapters of my life. I experienced a strong wave of thankfulness during those times. It was the satisfaction of knowing that my sacrifices were appreciated, and that I was genuinely seen. Our strongest connection was not expressed verbally but rather through silence. One night, weeks after the formal investigation into the Orion event was over, I recall being exonerated but left with scars. We were cruising the Arabian Sea's warm, murky seas on the deck of the USS Farragut. Above us, the stars formed a bright, uncaring canopy. I had remained silent for a while, merely seeing the ship's glowing wake. "I'm sure you're thinking about them." Ben's voice was so quiet that it could hardly be heard above the roar of the motors. He knew who they were, so I didn't have to ask. In a rare departure from my military stance, my shoulders slumped. "Ben," I said thinly, "sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. Everything." He took a while to respond. His unwavering presence stood next to me as he gazed up at the American flag, which was flapping sharply in the night breeze. At last, with a fixed gaze, he answered, "It's worth it to the people on this ship, Admiral. I think it's worth it, and ultimately what matters is the family." He was just reminding me of the family I had fought for and chosen, not attempting to mend my relationship with my parents. The day my career nearly ended, that silent loyalty was solidified into an unbreakable bond. Vice Admiral Henry Stokes called me to a secret hearing at the Pentagon after using me as a scapegoat for the Orion disaster. I was certain that I would have to deal with the political wrangling alone. However, I was mistaken. Ben was the first person I saw after the hearing was over, and I left the sterile, frightening chamber feeling worn out and demoralized. From Norfolk, he had taken a plane to Washington, D.C. on his own initiative. Despite the fact that we were indoors, he was standing across the hall in his spotless dress uniform, holding a black umbrella under the bright fluorescent lights. His face was harsh yet determined as he approached me. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" or "I told you so." As if to protect me from more than just the rain outside, he just opened the umbrella. With a steady, low voice he answered, "I'm here, Admiral. No matter what happens, I'm not leaving. There is a witness to the truth." I knew I wasn't alone in that antiseptic government hallway, under that absurdly formal roof. Neither blood nor a common name formed the foundation of our relationship. It was tempered by the high seas storms, forged in the furnace of shared responsibility, and sealed by a silent, unshakable loyalty. It was more resilient than blood, and when the last storm, the one that was building inside my own family, finally burst, it would be the only thing I could really rely on. In the years that followed, my alliance with Ben became into my stronghold. In a world where my own biological relations viewed me as little more than a tool, I was a bulwark of loyalty. I was foolish to believe that the consequences of the Orion tragedy may have altered them, that a near catastrophe might have caused them to reevaluate their goals. However, I was mistaken. They never change, as demonstrated by my father's phone call a month prior to Clara's wedding. They simply come up with new, sneakier ways to take advantage of you. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the call came in. I was going over personnel files in my office at Naval Station Norfolk. Charles was listed as the caller ID when my phone rang. It wasn't common. My father mostly used short, impersonal holiday texts to communicate. With a well-known feeling of caution squeezing my stomach, I responded. However, he spoke in an exceptionally friendly, almost cheerful tone. "It's been too long, Elena, my love. How are you?" I was alert at once. The individual who disregarded my graduation did not speak in this manner. It was a show. He inquired about my health, the Virginia weather, and my command, questions that any other father would ask, but they felt forced and odd coming from him. He remarked nonchalantly, "I heard your fleet just secured a major contract for next-generation sonar technology. Interesting stuff." I had a glimmer of optimism for one stupid, desperate instant. Perhaps he was at last making an effort. Perhaps he no longer viewed me as merely a departure from his life's plan after all these years. I gave a careful response, disclosing some unclassified information.